In this tutorial video, we're going to continue on kind of what we were working on last time. So instead of making a custom panel, this time we're going to control how the phone call is controlled. So we're going to use some JavaScript Lambda code to interpret the caller and control how that caller is routed. So let's go ahead and set up a Lambda function here. We'll execute by default as me. We'll switch to node 10. We'll set it to be a route type panel. This is sort of a hint right now that tells us that you'd like this to be a routable trigger, or a routable Lambda function, not a triggered Lambda function. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's set this up so that it is a function that is going to respond with something very simple. So right now, we have our phone number, which is ringing to this voice menu that's named Hang Up. So let's go ahead and grab that ID, because we're going to need that. And let's have it so that we tell the context that we're done. And we do this, and let's just have it say something very simple, like you reached us, please hang tight. Okay, and then let's have it route to that IVR we just created. Sorry, usually I'm in full screen. Let's go ahead and switch, just to make that a little bit easier to read. Okay. We'll go ahead and test our Lambda function here and make sure that it runs. It ran. If we put some console log in here, we can be sure it ran. If we see the output, then we know it worked. And we are sure now. So now what let's do, because we know our code compiled and we visually inspected it and we say this looks correct. So let's go over to our phone number, and instead of dialing our voice menu directly, let's go jump through our Lambda function. Okay, so now let's go ahead and place a test call to that number, and let's listen to see if we hear our message. So the phone should start ringing.
Hello, we don't know you. Please hold for a while.
All right. So I screwed up and I actually chose the wrong Lambda function, so let's choose the right Lambda function this time. You can obviously route to more than one Lambda function. And let's just do that again, because the message you should hear is this one: you reached us, please hang tight.
You reached us, please hang tight. Hello, you have reached the test.
There you go. And so the second part there where it says, hello, you've reached the, and I hung up on it, that's this IVR. So we know we're getting routed to the correct IVR. That's fantastic. So to make this a little bit more interesting, let's have it conditionally route to a different IVR if we know who you are. So let's go grab the identifier for another IVR. And let's kind of rework our code here a little bit to have IVR1 being this one that I just copied. And let's have IVR2 being the one that we were using before. Okay. Let's put in IVR2 here just as a safeguard until we write some code. So the thing we can do now is we can take advantage of the fact that we have contact lists. So let's go ahead and use this API endpoint that contact lists provide us, which is called the contains endpoint. So the contains endpoint is interesting because normally you can just send a head request, which means you're not expecting any data to come back. You're just looking at the status code. So in this case, what status codes we're looking for would be a 404, which would indicate we did not find that member, so that therefore they're not a member of the list, or a 204, which means we did find them on the list. So let's go ahead and take a look at the contact list and just make sure we know we have at least one number in the list. So we do have a member of the list. Let's go ahead and grab the contact list ID. That way we can make a request to this endpoint to check to see if that person is in the contact list. Let's just store that as list ID here. Okay. Now there is a method of invoking API requests inside of this, and that it looks like this. So let's do context.ctm.api. In this case, we'll just use get because it's easy. Let's create another variable just so we don't run out of space here on this line, called API call, and let's just call it. So lists are actually let's use we'll use template string. That way we can just embed the list ID like this, which is quite nice. Contains, and then we know we need a phone number parameter, which is something like that. Now we need to get the phone number from the caller, so let's make sure we have a reference to the call itself. And remember, we can get that from the activity. The call has a property called caller number. Let's use that to populate the phone number field or parameter on this URL. Let's pass in our API call. And remember that in JavaScript, in this case, we have promises. So then, and this is going to return like an HTTP object. If something goes wrong, we'll return something kind of like this as well. Now, because it's a promise, we don't want to call this context function here. Instead, we want to call it here. In fact, we probably also need to call it here too. This is the error case, so let's just say something went wrong. But here, what we could do is say http.response.status code, equals 204, and else. Pretty much the 404 case will just handle as the else condition. We could be more specific here and say else if it's a 400 because maybe we did something wrong, or I don't know, something wrong, right? There are other status codes, but generally speaking, it's a binary response of 204 and 404. So let's go ahead and log here just so we see that this is working. We found you, and let's go ahead and log here. We did not find you. I think that's the correct English. Let's try and run that. Let's see what happens. So we found you. So that's pretty cool because just to remind you guys, the test rig. So when you go to full screen mode, it doesn't prompt you to tell us the phone call you want to test with, and so I can come in here now and choose like a different phone number. Let's choose this one, and then we run it again, and you can see it made that API request, and it says we did not find you. That's because I only added one phone number to the list, the phone number I'll be calling from. That way, it's very easy to test it. But yeah, so hopefully what we've just shown you or gone over here is that it's pretty easy to set up a contact list. So what you could do with the contact lists if you wanted to is, you could upload, a list of known customers, maybe different segments of customers. You could have different lists with different segments of customers, and then you could have some logic that decides whether or not a person is on a list or not. Should indicate that we should ring a certain IVR or not another IVR. So let's go ahead and finish this up, though. I realized I didn't put the other IVR case in here. You seem to be new. Just 1 minute. While we connect you to a agent. Something cool like that, right? So hopefully this is a kind of an interesting use case here. So just to hear this in action, so IVR2, as you recall, let's grab the ID and let's go look up IVR2. Just make sure we know what IVR2 is. IVR2 is the hang-up menu. So from the primary test number, we're gonna get routed to the hello, you've reached the test phone number, and then for the other one, you're gonna get to the please hold while we trail off into nothingness. So let's go ahead and place our two test calls here just so we hear them. Live demos are so much cooler when they work. Just waiting for it to ring. There we go.
You reached us. Please hang tight. Hello, you have reached the test phone line.
All right.
Let me know if you hear this clip.
There you go. So with that test call, you can hear that we got the status code indicating that the caller was in the list. So we played the "You have reached us, please hang tight." We routed you to the second IVR. Contrast that with the other option, which would be "We didn't find you," and we play this longer message to you. So that should hopefully help you guys understand how you can use this to now programmatically control the flow of a phone call from the very start of the call, reroute the caller to a different IVR, play them some custom information in response to either an internal API call from CTM, or perhaps you want to make some external API requests. So perhaps we could extend this demo a little bit further by making a request to the weather API, and instead of just saying something like this, we could say, "Hey, we noticed the weather is quite gloomy or quite beautiful in your area," and go from there. But we'll leave that up to maybe a future video. And for now, hopefully you found this pretty nice and useful. All right.